of 1998 in Encino, California. It had a website that basically allowed you to go and look for stuff, kind of a TV guide, if I'm reading Wikipedia correctly. It was launched actually with the name UTV, Your Ultimate Television Network, which got them not very far because United Television sent a cease and desist letter by way of their lawyer saying that branding looks too similar to our United Television. Ultimately, in the year 2000, it became a part of the Tribune Company and the name was sold to Microsoft. I think I heard a couple of panelists observing that Microsoft took that and actually used the brand for a while as a direct TV receiver that was specially programmed to be both a DVR and an internet access device. October of 2000, and operated for a little while, force of nature, however, by 2003, it was removed from the market. That's been a long enough time, I think, that we can take Ultimate TV and possibly redefine it for our own purposes. We may see that UHD, which is now going as the Ultra HD new format for the consumer electronics industry, may be a kind of Ultimate. Might be something to chat about with our folks here. But there are a number of other angles, I think, that are much more in line with what what Rick had in mind to basically let this panel go over. I would encourage those of you online and those here, I'm not going to spend time introducing each of the speakers because Victor has done a nice job of putting bios and photos up on the website for the event. In the dhsessions.com area Wednesday, this is the number 3, so Wednesday 3, we'll give you the background on all of our speakers, and I encourage, including the two who didn't make it. So I encourage you to go to the website and get the background because we do have some pretty experienced folks here engaged. Our intent here, as I said, is to let everybody basically give a little bit of an introduction of themselves, their background and involvement in things relevant to this industry, and we have a diverse group from different parts. So I think we'll get this started, and I'm going to, not totally randomly, ask Michael Jeffrey from Peel, because while he was not here in the May session, one of his counterparts was. So he's our thread of continuity to the past.
Yeah.
Give us an introduction. What is Peel? What made you appear here, and what do you think an Ultimate TV is going to mean to our audience?
All right, I'll start with a little bit about Peel. Peel is a smart remote. So it's on over 150 million handsets used around the world, mostly Android handsets. And the idea here is all of us have smartphones, and individuals today typically use a hard remote, fumble around with it. What Peel has done is put an all image-driven, UI-driven smart remote at your fingertips in your smartphone for all those smartphones that we all carry with us even while we're watching TV. And so our vision here is really changing the way people experience TV, from making it recommendation-driven to ability to basically automate those tasks of switching from your OTT to your VOD to your cable system, etc. So Peel's in about 100 countries and launched on all of the major handsets. As far as what brings me here, it's an area that I'm pretty passionate about around digital media and basically changing the way individuals experience content. So it's a little bit about why I'm here.
Great. Anupam, I think I'll have you go next.
Sure.
And I know you're doing a little bit of work that may have something to do with the content that gets seen in these over the top and other devices.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. So I'm Anupam Gupta. I'm the head of product at Vubiquity. So a little bit about Vubiquity. We are a global provider of multi-platform services as well as technical solutions. We work across about 37 countries, and we work with about 500 content providers all the way from studios and networks. to about 400 service providers. Traditionally, I would say in the cable MSO space. And what the company's traditionally done is really enable a lot of the functions of the supply chain to procure content, to distribute content, prep content, and power on-demand systems. Why am I here? Because from a consumer perspective, everyone's looking for, how do I get access to what has been my TV experience on all devices seamlessly? It's a very simple statement. I think we all can kind of relate to that. But if you start dissecting that as to how you deliver that, there's a ton of complexity that kind of comes in, right? From a supply chain perspective, fragmentation across devices, how do you manage rights? What does that OTT experience look like? Anyway, there's just a ton of complexity that we can kind of talk about. So when we talk about the ultimate experience, it'll be great to kind of have a discussion of what that ultimate experience is, but also how do you enable that ultimate experience from a supply chain perspective.
Great, thank you. Michael Goodman.
Yes, thank you. I'm director of the digital media practice at Strategy Analytics. Strategy Analytics is a research and advisory firm focused on the digital consumer. As director of the digital media practice, our specific focus area is advising companies on the impact that that broadband, fixed and mobile, and connected devices are having on the distribution, the consumption, and the monetization of media entertainment, movies, videos, games, music, etc. As it relates to this panel, it really sits very smack in the center of the areas that we're focusing. One of the areas that we're focusing on is OTT video and really this cross-platform experience. And so to add to just all of the things that Anupam just spoken to focus on is geography, because we see very different consumption patterns and usage patterns and spend patterns when you move around the world. So it's, again, how people are consuming media, given the fact that they have limited time and money, and the impact that broadband and connected devices are having on their consumption patterns.
Okay. Ty, you've been around this industry for quite a while. Gracenote has introduced a lot of enabling technologies over the years. These days, what's the interest and focus on your company's involvement?
Okay, well, it's great to be here. So yeah, I'm Ty Roberts. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and the co-founder of Gracenote. Gracenote's been mostly known for music, and it's metadata and information services that power things like iTunes or Spotify or other music platforms. And we started that way back when in the late 90s. And then we were acquired by Sony. And as part of Sony, we got into television. So we started getting into having guide products and information products. And in building those guide products, we needed to have more data and information. And we became to use the Tribune Media Systems guide products, which are TMS, which was basically kind of the core of a guide product. And then we expanded a bunch of international information around that. This year, we left Sony and we basically merged with Tribune. And so now Gracenote's about 1,300 people. And I think we have the largest guide product in the world. We've bought a bunch of different other guide products. And so really what we're looking at is the services and the information for what's happening on broadcast television, what's happening in internet and over-the-top content, what's happening on VOD, and then what's happening, of course, in music and music video. So across all those media realms, we want to have the complete set of information. And then the services, which allow somebody to experience kind of a personalized version of that wherever you are. That could be on your TV. So the ultimate TV could have been the 4K TV that's in my living room, or it could be something I'm looking at on my iPad and when I'm sitting by the bay out here, or it could be, hopefully in the future, you can even just go to the hotel here and turn on the television at the hotel, and your whole television internet service will come to you just like you're at your home. And that's kind of an area where I see expansion, which is really even the MSOs and cable operators, they're becoming platform vendors. They're taking their very complicated delivery systems, and they're putting all this information in there and services, and they're almost willing to let people just brand it as powered by, Comcast or whatever, and they will come to other countries and other places in the world, because these systems are still, it's taken these large companies, decades to get these things to actually work. And other countries want the similar services, but don't have the software chops or the time or money or capital to really build it. So part of it is just this kind of global expansion of rich, I'll call it multimedia services. And there's some big challenges there because the stuff that's on over the top is not fully integrated generally today with what's happening in broadcast or what's happening in I think there's competitive issues around that. But I think that's coming together. I think the reality is the fragmentation of content and services, like what's happening with HBO this week, is an indication that in a few years, there'll be a lot of icons on your device, whatever it is, and those icons that won't necessarily be locked into a specific delivery plan. And I do see it going to be a very big business challenge for everyone, because I think that the way that in which content has been bundled and consumed to this point has been kind of with these kind of large packages, and I think the fragmentation of that is going to change things. And having come from the music business, you can see how the music business has changed, and that change will be, I think, even more dramatic for the television business. So it's a very exciting time, because there's going to be, late to say it, not as losers, but things are going to change, and it's a great time for consumers because they'll have more choice. But I do think it's a really big challenge together. 10 years from now, I think it'll have happened, but the next 5 years is going to be pretty complicated.
Great. Thank you. And TK, you've been around the digital Hollywood and the community here for more than 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think have a perspective on some of the changes we've seen across the board. Actually, I think all the elements that these other speakers hit on. Where do you see this ultimate TV and some of the key driving elements behind it? Where it go?
I'm the publisher of Home Media Magazine, which was launched 1 year after a guy named Andre Blade licensed 50 movies from Fox and put them out on video cassette, thus giving birth to the home video industry. And I've been covering I didn't join at that point, of course, but I've been covering the business for about 25 years. And I can tell you unequivocally that every technological change has always been driven not by better quality or more content or better content, but by ease and simplicity. We saw it in music, when we saw all sorts of great technological advances like Super CD and digital audio, and the average consumer was happy with the crappy sound on their iPad or iPod. We see it now with movies and TV shows, that we have all sorts of ultra HD and high definition, and yet people are perfectly content to watch Netflix streaming simply because it's easy and simple. For example, what you touched upon, I'm waiting for the day when I can junk my universal remote, which weighs about 2 pounds and runs out of batteries every 20 minutes, and have an app on my iPhone so I can control my TV and switch around from PlayStation to Blu-ray disc to Netflix to whatever else I want on there. And I do think that the biggest game changer that we've seen in recent years is the N-word, Netflix. Netflix has completely changed the business to the point where if you look at the home entertainment business, which we can broadly define as the business of getting entertainment into the consumer home, so that you can watch what you want, when you want, where you want it. They have changed it from being the old rental versus sell-through to VOD and pay-per-view and all these different, little elements. Right now, you can define the business as either transactional or subscription. And the big firefight looming on the horizon is going to be how the studios, who have always wanted to have a bigger piece of the action, are going to try to get a bigger piece of subscription by making it transactional, which may be a chaotic quest. I don't know, but that's going to be the big battleground of the future.
Last week in San Francisco, Vanity Fair held what they call the New Establishment Summit, an interesting mixture of essentially the Silicon Valley technologists and so on, and drew a little bit of press from the fact that a number of very conspicuous movie industry names, George Lucas and others, attended the event. Looking at a influence, maybe a shift in some of the emphasis of driving home entertainment in the way that we traditionally know of it. And I'll let anybody on the panel who wants to take a hit at this. Where do you see the movement from traditional motion picture studios? TK said, and the VHS, which begat Laserdisc temporarily, it begat DVDs, we begat Blu-ray, and who knows what next in packaged media, which is showing growth. But what's going to happen with all this technology, over-the-top stuff, to this traditional blockbuster entertainment, getting that into the homes?
Well, I think you see more competition. I mean, because while our distribution platforms have exploded, there's all sorts of ways to get entertainment in the home. So has the content. I mean, 10 years ago, nobody in Hollywood ever envisioned that the big buzz of the week would be created by a 30-second clip of a fat farting cat on YouTube. They didn't even envision there would be a thing like YouTube. So we see so much more content coming in, content made exclusively for the web, YouTube channels. So just like our distribution horizons have broadened, so has our content. And I expect to see more and more content that's specifically tailored to new technologies.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, you can also take into account that with the explosion of different devices that we have in consumers' hands, that we're seeing different usage patterns on them. For example, we see a lot more long form content on connected TVs and on tablets versus smartphones and laptops tend to skew more towards shorter form content, snacking types of behavior, so that we see very different behavioral patterns. And this extends into the greater context of how we consume. It's really all of these devices have created what I call sort of personalized TV. And that's the idea. If you think back even like 5 or 10 years ago to how we watch television, basically, I don't know how it is in your households, but mine, it's he who owns the remote owns the TV. On Sunday afternoons, that makes my daughter very upset when I'm watching football. They didn't have a choice on something else to watch. Well, fast forward to today, they sort of roll their eyes at me, look at me, know that the TV is busy for the next 3.5 hours, and they go up and get to their tablet and go watch Netflix. They are very happy they have an alternative to this. And what that has done is it's created personal viewing environments for individuals. It's the individualization of viewing rather than it being more of a communal affair, which it had been in the past.
Yeah, I also would say that the internet services and over-the-top services are realizing, before they saw themselves purely as distributors, but now they're of course becoming content creators, because they need distribution, basically they need differentiation from their competitors. And so they must have a must-have show, and even Amazon has this, and of course Netflix has this, but they're all looking at this. I would be guess that within a year or so, you'll see Apple have its own content, which they never said they would never ever do, but they'll probably have to do that. And so the reality is that that's shifting things, because that means, okay, now we have content. That means we have new stars. It means there's a new system for bringing internet stars onto the platforms. There's already agencies here in town who represent the internet stars to some of these platforms. So once the agents are in the picture, it starts to be a kind of a completely different ecosystem. And I agree on the use patterns. I have a 15-year-old son. My son is a cord never. He won't touch that Comcast remote. He doesn't even know if there's anything on that thing he ever wants to watch. It's 100% tablet, 100% mobile. Like if the cartoon channel happens to be on, he might watch it. But other than that, there's nothing on Comcast at 15 that he's ever watched. And so it's broadcast television to him is like, what's that? Because I choose what I want to watch when I want to watch it. And there's plenty of stuff for him to watch on YouTube and Netflix so far. So that's another problem, which is there's a ton of content that they can find that's actually interesting to them. And also socially, they're connected to his friends. They're sending links all the time back and forth of content, Netflix, even cartoons or anime or whatever other stuff that's on there. And that is how he consumes. So I do believe there's a societal change for some set of people. That's not everybody. I think if you're really into sports, you're obviously going to watch broadcast television. If you're into like these really awesome TV shows that are out there, you're going to watch it. But that's not necessarily everybody. So I think that fragmenting, it's exactly what happened in music. In music, the choices fragmented everyone's taste. So not everyone was into U2. People could now be into 1,000 bands. And that's what's happened in music. And I see that happening kind of in video content as well.
I want to build on where he themes choices. I think consumers have more choices than ever to consume video. And I think technology-wise, we'll probably see more fragmentation, like Ty's highlighted. I think really consumers, as the years go by, will look for the choices that I care about, the content that I want to consume, and then the personal theme has come up a couple of times where it may be context on my tablet, on my smartphone. I'm a cord never. That's my son and daughter also. And short form that's their world.
Mhm.
And for others, it may be long form. So that's that personal, individual choice. And I think technology's there and content to enable people to get at the content they love and then to recommend and tailor over time. Because I do believe there's an explosion of content, short and long form. And that's coming all over the world.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just to add a slightly different take on it, I think I agree that there is the Cordneverse, but that being said, I think we also have to define a little bit more clearly what we mean by by television viewing. A lot of times when we say Cordneverse, we're talking about distribution channels. I'm not watching through Comcast, to your example.
right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not watching the programming, because that same programming that is offered through Comcast is also a lot of it's on Hulu, it's on Netflix. And so it is being consumed in other places and in other ways. So I think I continue to hear sort of this idea that that particularly millennials don't watch television. And I don't completely agree with that. Yes, they're watching a lot more short form content than other groups, that being said, but they are watching television. They're just not watching it through what I'll call sort of the traditional distribution channel. They're not watching it through their cable subscription. They're watching it through Netflix. They're watching it on YouTube. They're downloading off of peer-to-peer networks, but they are watching that content. So it depends on where you sit in the ecosystem. If you're a cable guy, well, this is not necessarily a pretty picture, at least for your video product. But if you're a content owner, it just means that dollars and viewing is shifting from one medium to another medium, which is that's not necessarily as bleak a picture as oftentimes gets painted.
I think that's extremely astute. I think you're absolutely correct, which is my son is watching some of those shows and some classic, I don't know what, kids comedy shows, whatever, on Netflix. That stuff is on there. I think the challenge is what happened in music is that the rates that one could get as a content producer to put my show on the MSO network, very high, big money, because they're getting paid hundreds of dollars potentially by each consumer to have the cable system in their house. When music did this, it's now what's on Spotify. They're getting, a sliver of a penny. So that's a big challenge, which is because Spotify, a Netflix consumer is paying, what are they paying now per month?
I think it's $9 a month. They just announced not $8.99 a month. And
Right.
They just announced for 4K.
So that's a challenge. 4K probably even more, but
Yeah.
for the ecosystem to have equality, that would need to be more like 100, and it's not. So that's a little bit better than music. Music will be about exactly. Music would be about 9 cents a month. But the reality is that I think that's a challenge, and maybe as more content moves over there, they'll tier it. They'll have some ways to basically generate more revenue, like you're saying. So that's going to be very important to the industry if it's going to go subscription.
Yeah, the other thing, just kind of building on that, is even if you have a cable TV subscription and you want to watch your programming on any device, that's not happening today. I mean, yeah, if you're a Comcast subscriber, I am, you can watch 50 live channels in the apps. Great, but it's not my entire lineup. I can watch, some new season stuff, right, on demand. It's not my entire lineup, right? And then of course I have, the deep library stuff, and of course Netflix is all deep library. My point is there's all kinds of consistency, right? From or inconsistency rather.
Makes for good business for me because no consumers can figure out where any one thing is across any of these things.
Right.
So they need a guide, or they need something to tell them this is available in your region at this time in this mode, automatically, which is kind of crazy.
Right. Yeah.
But at some point, that just goes away. And I think from a consumer perspective, listen, if I'm paying for a TV service and that's got these things, I just want access to all those things across all my devices.
Right.
And we're not there, right? So linear streaming and current season, and and if I want to buy something, if I want to own movies, everything should be consistent. I think we're not that far off, but it's going to take a couple of years, right? Just to kind of sort through that and provide that consistency.
Well, we took a step when Comcast began selling movies, in addition to streaming them, and that business actually, I mean, in the context
Right.
that people will never buy downloads the way that they used to buy discs, because the ownership desire isn't that strong anymore if you buy something digitally.
But that said, I mean, the ownership this year is $1 billion business.
Right.
Right. Most of it driven by, iTunes and Amazon, right?
Right.
And studios, certainly going back to your kind of question earlier, studios certainly want to push digital ownership and want to experiment with different business models and incentives for how we can kind of push that.
Right.
There's challenges on the distribution side about how do you kind of, implement things like locker services and other things and experiment with
Right.
those business models, right?
And the big deal there is that, I mean, the reason you still see Blu-ray discs and DVDs in stores is because the studios have never been able to get that value proposition out of downloads. I mean, digital HD, which is, the fancy word for electronic sell-through, it certainly is growing, and there is a market for it, as Comcast has shown.
Absolutely.
And yet there are concerns that it'll never get anywhere near as big as Blu-ray disc and DVD, because first of all, the younger generation doesn't have that yen to own that maybe some of us older people do. And number two, there's, it's hard to shell out, $15 or even $10 for something you don't really see. Okay, now I own The Wizard of Oz on a digital download. Well, I'd rather have it on a disc so I can look at it and, and hold it. So the collectability is not there, and that's why EST or digital HD, may never become as big as the Blu-ray disc business.
Yeah, in Strategy Analytics, when we do our forecasting for the over-the-top video market, we really just, the net is that subscription is eating sell-through and rentals lunch. That subscription right now is accounting for about 70% of over-the-top video revenues, and Netflix is 68% of that. Electronic sell-through is about 20%, and in transactional rental is about 10%. So you can see just how important subscription has become. It has completely turned the home entertainment market onto its head. It's essentially a model that didn't exist 10 years ago. If we go back 10 years ago, sort of the heyday of sell-through, it was about a $15 billion business. Today in the U.S., sell-through is about a $7 or $8 billion business, and it's going down year over year. There's still a market there. But those dollars are transitioning from an electronic sell-through model into a subscription model that essentially to the consumer, there's more value to them in the subscription model than there is in ownership.
And the funny thing is, nobody saw it coming.
Yeah.
I remember when Netflix, began saying we're going to begin streaming movies and, and maybe focus a little bit more on that instead of our discs by mail. People thought, it'll never go. I mean, the studios aren't going to give them very good stuff, first of all. So basically, the studios would even laugh, yeah, we're just going to give them our crap and see where it goes. Well, the audience for that crap, has become pretty big. And I know in our household, I'll bring home the hot new movie on Blu-ray disc. Hey, who wants to see Transformers Extinction? Who wants to see this? No, we're watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure on Netflix.
I think it's really rare when you can say somebody is truly a visionary. But I mean, I've been an analyst now for over 15 years, and I can remember in the very early days of Netflix sitting across from Reed Hastings at an analyst briefing, and this is even before they'd ever announced their streaming service. He said the DVD business is just a placeholder until technology for me to do streaming. And we just kind of sat there and said, "Yep." And here we are, fast forward today, and their business it's a streaming business, and it is basically completely eating the lunch of everybody else out there. The man was truly a visionary.
Let me give the audience a chance here. Anybody got a question for the group or individually for any one of the panelists here? Yes.
Is it more a matter of the EST world subscription world, there's content that people want to view, and it's less about ownership, it's more about the ability to view the content multiple times.
Yes.
That's why
And it's access. So, I mean, and I think all of us have probably done this. I mean, on Comcast, I've paid $14.99 or whatever they charge for the full, bought it just because we had to watch that movie that day. So, all right, I did it. Even though I have a Netflix subscription, I would have preferred to find it on Netflix for nothing because I'm already paying for that. But I would access is king. The other thing I would just say is culturally, if you live in an urban area, you can see all the young people. Everything is rental. Everything is it's Uber. It's their whole lifestyle. It's Airbnb. And there's just tons of people who have changed their whole lifestyle to where ownership is not as important to them. Being able to have flexibility to use their time the way they want and to go anywhere they want at a little bit lower cost is what the young people of today, it's how they think. And so, it's also a big change. The people work in my company, when I hang out with the 20 somethings in my company, this is how they think. And that's just change. Access. It's all access or everything.
It's really that access, I think, more than anything, and flexibility. And there are choices today, which leads to that fragmentation. And I think it's going to increase. So individuals have more ways to consume. I'm going to use the word video now and not say whether it's broadcast or whether it's long form or short form. And with that, I think the consumers increasingly are moving to the mediums that can give me access to the content when I want. And then the classic time window or the consumption window where I have to consume it in 24 hours. I mean, people are choosing now to say, I may actually want a snack over a period of time, and I want the flexibility to consume it maybe over several days. So some people are choosing in interesting numbers. And again, I think all the platforms that enable that access to resume or to not have to choose up front whether I'm going to consume it all right now, I think we'll win over time.
Yeah, I think that it's not just one single thing that makes subscription service successful. It's certainly the things we talked about here. I'll add one more term in there: value. So one of the ones is where you get value in multiple ways. So to the ownership question, for anybody who has kids, you will know that your kids will watch a video over and over again. But instead of paying $10 for every disc that they want to watch, I can pay $9 to Netflix and have access to that entire library. I can pay $99 to Amazon and get this whole host of, which works out to less than $10 a month, probably about $7 or $8 a month. And I get all of that content. And I'm not paying for essentially the same price of one disc. I don't get one disc, but I get this massive library of content. And now that starts to change the value dynamics there, because for that same price, I get that whole library. Then I also have the user interface. It's a lot easier to find that stuff. There is also an incremental value that subscription brings to the long tail. I would not pay $10 to experiment with some movie that I may or may not like. But if it comes up on my profile, some movie I've never heard of, and it looks interesting, I'll click on it. I'll invest my 5 minutes to see it's worthwhile viewing, and I may like it. I may think it's terrible, but it's okay in that manner because I really haven't invested anything in there. And then lastly, and that kind of sort of ties into that search and recommendation of how do you monetize the value of that long tail. So it's not one single thing that makes subscription more value. It's really compilation of things that make subscription value that didn't exist in these other models.
In addition to that, right? I mean, I totally get the subscription, the value thing. I think there's also a place for things like ownership and transactional in the spirit of consumer choice, right? So my kids every year, as an example, go through the whole Harry Potter series. And every year, right? Maybe multiple times a year, $199, $299, Amazon. Before you know it, you've paid a lot of money just for individual rentals. Does ownership make sense for that kind of a scenario? Absolutely, but it's choice, right? I think that's what it comes down to. Yeah. And they kind of seek out these different services and different models and whatever it makes sense.
And that's not to say that there's not people who want to collect videos. There certainly are. There's a good segment of the population that wants to own videos as well. It's just not as big as it used to be.
I think subscription has given us kind of a quasi ownership. I mean, for example, should I go out and spend $200 on the Breaking Bad series? Well, my first impulse is, yeah, I love that show. But now all of a sudden I go to Netflix, it's all there, and it'll be there a month from now. It'll be there 6 months from now. So I kind of do own it already. So I don't need to go out and buy it.
There's also
Phil?
different kinds of consumers.
Yeah, we get some more audience questions here.
Oh.
Phil, what's the first one?
Yeah, I understand why there isn't a universal program guide, because they don't want you to deep link into the services and subscribe or isn't there a service that goes to, say, a splash page that says the content's available here, but you must subscribe? What stops that from being done?
You will soon see such things.
Yes.
It's been the design right now. Some of the over-the-top platform box like the Roku or whatever, they are now integrating a universal search function across all of the applications and channels that are inside that box. Originally, they didn't do that. Apple doesn't have this feature. You have to run the icon, and then you're in the Netflix world, and it's Netflix's search. But now they realize like there's 30 icons, and just 2 NBA icons. Where am I going? What am I trying to find? And so that universal search function is coming there. That box still is not necessarily talking to your cable MSO service. So the universal search between that and the box, that will be coming, but that's coming with the latest generation of these over-the-top boxes. The key feature that the next generation over-the-top boxes have is overlay. So you can overlay it with the Google box, the information and the search and the guide on top of the broadcast signal. Doesn't matter where it comes from, and then it can control it and let you see it. So right now it's like an Amazon thing is this way too. It's an endpoint, so it's just like on a device. That's not the future. The future is overlay on top of whatever signal's there.
Yeah. Grace Note may not be able to name as many names as others, but if you look as I can, but if you look at Rovi, if you look at what TiVo is doing, if you look at what ContentWise is doing, these are just 3 examples of companies that are working on this unified search issue. And what I just said, that we're definitely going to see it from a service provider's perspective. Yes, they want to put up that wall and keep you within their service, but that is just, I would argue, that's just yet again maybe a short to midterm roadblock. In the long run, we are going to see unified search, and it probably will not be led by service providers. It's going to be led by others, but in the long run, we are going to be, because to what we always say, that consumers are not concerned about where they're getting their material. They have multiple sources, and he who can meet their needs is going to win out. And so whomever can create that unified search and give the best experience is ultimately going to force the marketplace to follow.
Yeah. At Peel, very, very much the same thing. We say it's access to that content, whether it's on your TV and being able to enable access there, access it directly on your tablet, on your smartphone. I think the question though is, why is it not available today? I think there are a number of folks that are in that intermediary mode where they want to protect their catalog and what they have content-wise. I say that's rapidly breaking down, and over the next several years, those companies, and certainly Peel's in that space too, enabling access, whether it be your VOD subscriptions you have, your catch-up TV, if we're talking about Europe, your OTT, your broadcast subscriptions, all of that, and even what's in your DVR, and presenting that to individuals saying, here's your personalized content that you like to watch. You can search for and select that. And regardless of how it was stored or delivered, that video is presented to you to consume.
Yeah, it should be intelligent and record what you want. I mean, I'll call it the virtual Maginot line of metadata isn't really going to work very well. So the idea of having a walled garden of around your content is just going to isolate consumers from really enjoying as much as they could. So be a little like, if we were back in the, early days of television and the TV guide you went to buy, like, sorry, Channel 3 is not listing their information in the TV guide. You just have to guess what's on, because we want to make sure that when you turn to Channel 3, you're watching our channel. It's kind of the metaphor. And so the reality is that's not really a great way for consumers.
And
So
that's
let's pull another question here and then go on. Yes, the young lady next to Phil.
Gigi Johnson from the UCLA Music Industry Program. We talked about consumer side of data. We also talked about your kids buying Harry Potter over and over again. What about the producer side of data? Inconsistency, I think, is the name of the game on what people are getting. Are there trends on what producers are getting, what studios are getting, as to the back end data after all this has been consumed? Any pressures for change, improvement, consistency?
I think that's a very good question. And I think that in the music business, yes, this has changed now to where the record companies are getting the play data, let's call it, for what's going on across a broad number of services so that they can better target their work at signing up the proper talent, figuring out what to promote, this kind of thing. I'm not sure that the play data is coming back from all sources in the video realm. Yes, when you purchase, you get it because you find out later so many people purchase this kind of a thing. But in some of these subscription services and some internet portals, they're not reporting necessarily all the statistical data. So that would be really great. The other thing is you need some kind of unifying identifiers and things to pull these things together, because the same movie is on this service and then this service and this service, but they all have different IDs because this guy's got the Netflix ID, this guy's got this other thing. At Tribune's data set that we have an ID for everything too, but that interchange of IDs also becomes important so that everybody can know they're talking about the same thing. So there's a few challenges there. I'll call it ID wars. Goes along with your walled garden wars. These are all tactics to basically, and what they do is they make the back channel data harder to aggregate and figure out what's really going on, which is not really that beneficial or to anyone. But again, people are trying to protect their turf.
Yeah, simplifying everything, on the studio side, the challenges are, number one, making sure you get data from everybody, who distributes your content. And then number two, which is starting to be a big problem, is what do you do with all this data once you get it? How do you analyze it? How do you, and then not just analyze it, but interpret it and put it to use so that it can benefit you.
Yeah,
That's actually becoming technologically easier. Right? I mean, if you have access to the data, and by the way, on the VOD side, we kind of have a little bit of experience with that, because when we distribute movies for transactional VOD, as an example, everyone is supposed to report back, what the buy rates, etc., are, right? But so there's a little bit of an enforcement, kind of there. But assuming that the data is coming back, and assuming it's coming back from every single endpoint where that movie was purchased or played, or where the title was purchased or played, right? Then I think the systems are there to actually make some interesting analysis, etc., quite easily.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do think you're going to find a revolution in that with the new audio fingerprinting and video fingerprinting technology that's going into the over-the-top boxes and into the smart TVs. So the glass on the TV sees everything that goes through it. And the glass will get the analytics, and they can see actually the real play information. So in music right now, it's not that I started playing the track. It's like, how long did I listen to it? Oh, I listened to it all the way through. I liked it.
That's
So-
very key.
So-
Today it's tough.
Yeah, but that's coming, and the reality is that you will eventually get a user base, watch this TV program, and it's seen the 20% of the people dropped off right there. And that's going to be, I don't know if you really want that information, because that's going to tell you some actor walked on the screen and a storyline went in a different direction. It might make you crazy about the kind of content you make, but you're going to get that information. And you'll also be able to see the different types of consumers. So in music, what people have found is that there are consumers who have very narrow interest in music broadly. There would be top 40 radio listeners, okay? And there's different kinds of users who have very deep knowledge, adventurous users who want to experiment, all kinds of different kinds of music. And so I feel that kind of person exists for television and movies as well. People who like Fellini and want to watch Warhol films and also watch, like there's also people who just want to watch the big hits. And so you need to then understand who that long tail consumer is and tailor things for them. And, that is, I think, a great opportunity with this information, is to really improve both the quality of the consumer and make them happier, and then get them to stuff that you have in your catalog that they didn't even know was there.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think there's some really interesting things happening on the discovery side, not so much the search. But if we look at some of the innovations that are occurring, if we think about sort of discovery, has a lot been about collaborative filtering. People who watched X also might like Y. But some of the things that to what Ty was talking about, certainly by age and gender, but also by location, by time of day. Even there is curation going on to identify specific aspects or characteristics of the video, similar to what Pandora does on the music space. That same sort of curation is being done in the video space to identify specific characteristics of video and identify that, research against it. Even weather is potentially being integrated into these discovery mechanisms. I think it was Uyala recently it was Uyala who put out the recent study showing the effect of weather on viewing patterns for over-the-top video. That was really interesting. And to start integrating all of these other characteristics really changes the discovery dynamic. And I really think discovery is different than search. Search is, I know what I want, I just don't know where it is. Discovery is what's out there that I might be interested in, and I don't know about it. And if you think about the size of libraries, I mean, what is Netflix? I think it's like 20,000 pieces of content out there. Other than somebody at Discovery, at Netflix, who knows what's sitting out there? I mean, periodically, I'm always finding something new and interesting on Netflix. And so this ability to unlock the value of these libraries, I think, is a really critical component, and will make them more valuable to the consumer in the future.
In music, the current strategy with Beats and things like is to expand consumers' taste in music. So if you can imagine, like, people have fairly narrow taste because they had restricted access, restricted radio. So now we're teaching people, and not everyone wants to do this, but a large portion, maybe half of people, would be interested to learn about different kinds of music and learn about different things. And that doesn't exist currently in a video product. Like, there's no product that says, come teach you about film. So we're going to go look at some Fellini. Then we're going to take you to travel films. And you're going to then see some amazing drama. And you're going to see some great classic films. And that might actually be important because consumers might have actually had access, but didn't have the broadness of taste to really understand or appreciate those products. And so those kind of ideas, I think, are going to be coming in the future, and I think are very, very exciting.
Yeah, and again, this ties back to that subscription model. You can do this in that subscription model because it's all there, and I'm not paying a la carte price for it every time something interesting comes up. Versus in a rental model or a electronic sell-through model. Great, you've just shown me all of the stuff that I may be interested in, but I'm unsure about it. Do I really like Fellini?
Yeah.
I don't really want to spend $10 on something that I may watch 30 seconds of and abandon it. Versus in Netflix model, yeah, sure. 5 minutes. I may like it. I may not like it. And the beauty of it is not only whether I like it or not, it's now learned that behavior, and that continues to build on my profile and present new content that I may or may not be interested in.
Yeah, to circle back on the angle of the question from the producer side and feedback into the supply chain. A good way and some buzzwords to look at, the Hollywood Information Technology Society is a very active group in the IT community, which is part of the backbone of building the computer systems and processes. A, to know what you have as a studio and the latest on the producers, and B, to figure out how you track it, follow its use, the revenue streams, and so on for it. Major emphasis within that group and other places, things to Google out and look for other events and conversations on. Big data is a very popular way of referring to this now, and getting into analytics that take the information from all these individual consumer experiences, try to link that back into where the content came from, to say, how am I going to adapt my marketing strategies and these things? How do I automate that so that I can take that tremendous amount of data and turning it into something that's useful? So it's a huge topic and can encompass its own conference easily, and has already and will continue to. We had another question over on the side here.
Yeah, hi, Dan Winkler, Warner Brothers. Related to this discussion on previous threads, have the sell-through or the streaming services got pricing right? And if not, where do you think that goes? Because we're making the comparison between, two rentals, the equivalent of Netflix subscription per month or per month. I know that we would acknowledge that we haven't gotten sell-through pricing right for our catalog, but if streaming truly is where the money is, I would say
Streaming is vastly underpriced, but the problem is, how do you change it? It's like, I can draw an analogy to gym memberships. The big trend right now among fitness centers is, instead of charging, $89 a month and a big membership fee, they charge $10 a month. And then they get thousands of members, the majority of them who never go there. If it's such a small blip, you're going to keep getting people in there, and you're going to build everything up by sheer mass. If Netflix doubled their price, what would happen?
Yeah, I think a couple of things along those lines is, to a large extent, the streaming business is a volume business that Netflix has to continue to grow to be able to afford to be able to sign the content deals that they're currently signing, to be able to produce the original programming that they're signing, so that growth is critical for them, which is one of the reasons why their stock price took a hit when they missed their U.S. Growth numbers this week, I think it was, when they announced them. But that's also why international markets are so important to them, because they're going to have, they're at 35 million, I think, in the US. Mm-hmm. That's about roughly 40, maybe 45% penetration of broadband households in the US. maybe even a little higher.
Pretty high.
How much more, how much more, you have to start to ask the question, how much more growth is there going to be in the US for Netflix? Then we can get into the whole HBO conversation of what's going to happen to Netflix when HBO enters the market. And oh, by the way, I wouldn't be shocked if sometime in the next 6 to 12 months you see Showtime and Stars enter the over-top market as well, because they're going to follow. With HBO in the marketplace, they're going to follow close on the heels.
They all have to.
So you're going to have that dramatically changes the competitive landscape for subscription video in the US, because I would argue that Showtime and HBO and Cinemax are going to be a much, much stronger competition to Netflix than Hulu. And Amazon's sort of a different animal ever were. Then, so that makes international markets absolutely critical. We are, though, starting to see some tiering going on in Netflix pricing. They just announced the $12.99 price for going forward for the 4K services. They recognize that. Some other issues, we fully believe that the content costs are going to continue to go up for Netflix. They have been they've been going up by roughly 500 million a year for Netflix. So that they have to right now, they have to grow their subscriber base. And as soon as you start to see their subscriber base is slowing in their growth overall, then you have to start. That's a really big red flag, because the next thing that they have to look to is price increases.
Right.
The one thing that we have not talked about when we talk about subscriptions or streaming is the pay TV operators, right? You know, we've talked a lot about Netflix and other new services, but remember, the pay TV operators have the lineup. The thing that they have different is live TV and current season. And they have to, in my opinion, they have to kind of play in the streaming world, right? You know, with essentially what the subscription price consumers are already paying them. They're not quite there. They haven't moved as fast, except for some of the big guys, but they absolutely kind of have to. So in that case, it's about how they approach things like pricing, right? Is it just a part of the package? Is there something incremental kind of there? I think there's a bunch of experimentation to happen there too.
Yeah, and when we look at the rental, specifically the rental market, we think that it's still going to be the subscription video providers, the Comcast, the Verizons, that will own that piece of the pie. I said before in our forecast that rental is about 10%, but that's exclusive. That's strictly over the top. That's exclusive, not including the service provider rental numbers as well. So we believe that they're going to own the majority of those revenues.
Okay, another question?
My name is Howard Horowitz from Horowitz Research. It's interesting to me observing this panel that the entire discussion has been about the marginal part of the business, the VOD part of the business. Just now, how many minutes into this panel you mentioned cable operators, networks, and aggregated content. So to put that in the form of a question, with HBO perhaps as a watershed this week, do we see this, the marginal part of TV viewing and consumption business, which is the VOD business, which summarizes everything we just talked about, leading now very quickly to the disaggregation of all these networks and broadcasters and television as we know it, or these two elements of TV and ultimately can be continued forward, and for how long?
Well, first of all, I would beg to differ that this is the marginal side of the business. If you look at the heyday of home entertainment, sell-through is a $15 billion business in the U.S. and rental was a $8 billion business. So where's dollars roughly 2 to 1 in terms of sell-through. So the big thing to me is the overall is that's a $22 billion business. So how are those dollars? To me, it's how is that the big part of the pie shifting?
I mean small by more.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of different pieces here that we haven't talked about. I mean, there's the whole, dollars from pay TV for subscription that we haven't really talked about here, and cord cutting. And that's a whole separate issue altogether that we haven't addressed here. I think we've been talking a lot about the home video marketplace, which clearly to me is not when you talk about at its heyday, a $23 billion business in the US is not an inconsequential business.
So we're not actually, this discussion is not about TV.
Well,
Well,
that's where it's
it
been
is.
focused.
You
to
know,
this point.
if you want to talk about cable, I mean, I think there's a lot of conjecture. I mean, I think clearly the cable companies are in trouble right now because they see their business going OTT, and they see, and they're obviously what HB2 is trying to do now is jump into the game, and they'll probably be very successful at it. That said, if everybody else jumps into it, you know, there can be a major sea shift in the whole cable industry. The other question is, with Netflix, you know, being this giant force out there, you can talk to one studio president and he'll say, yeah, Netflix is killing my sell-through business. The next guy will say, you know what? Netflix is really killing broadcast television. Those are the viewers who it's siphoning off of. The truth is Netflix is siphoning viewers off of everything, every single form of entertainment out there. And everybody's going to have to react to what they're doing. And everybody, by the same token, is watching very carefully to see what's going to happen next with Netflix. The penetration issue is very, very interesting. You know, have we reached saturation? Can we say that, you know, look, if you haven't subscribed to Netflix right now, it's been this huge buzzword for at least 5 years, you're probably not going to. So where is their growth going to come?
Yeah, I think you also have to sort of think about how has we call them, that we've referred to them for decades, at least that I've been in the business, is pay TV operators. And I think that's really a misnomer because within their product set, pay TV is, the value of it is declining. Subscribers are leaving. But what's the one thing now that you can't do without? Somebody's got to provide you broadband access. If you want Netflix, you have to have broadband. And if you look at the profit margins on the respective businesses, where are they getting, what is the most profitable for these operators? It's the pay TV, it's the broadband side of the business. Their businesses, I think they're slow making this transition from television being the lead dog in their product portfolio to broadband being the lead dog in their product portfolio. So 10 years from now, will we refer to them as pay TV providers anymore? Maybe not. Maybe we just call them broadband companies at that point. No, they always remain critical to that ecosystem because they own the pipes.
Right.
Well, that's also because that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. A lot of them are evaluating just becoming broadband businesses, high margin businesses. That's also because to deliver the experience of pay TV consistent across screens, right, there's just a ton of cost and complexity. And frankly, the development resources and other things that they need to invest to compete with the likes of Netflix, right? That's challenging. So the question is, are there some viable, you know, cloud-enabled services, et cetera, that can be available to these guys that help them compete? Because with the one thing, remember what they do have, they have the rights. You talked about a little bit about unbundling. They do have the rights to that whole kind of package, live TV and VOD. Granted, all of them might not have right to multi-platform, but they do have rights to that package. They just haven't technically enabled the same kind of solutions as the Netflixes and other services have been doing. The question is, can they?
So, oh, sorry, yes.
Can you guys talk about the future of monetization, short form content? I know a lot of that, viewing is obviously going towards that way. A lot of people, millennials, are on YouTube more than ever. It doesn't seem to be part of the revenue making just yet, especially because YouTube stars are kind of catapult up into mainstream content. YouTube put out paid subscription channels that haven't seemed to take off quite yet.
Well, so first of all, I think when I very first started this conversation, I talked about regionalization in different geographies, because this conversation is actually spot on when it comes to how content is being monetized in different countries. So in the US, if you think about the split between, I'll call it indirect revenue generation, which is basically it's advertising, and direct revenue, which is consumer spend coming directly out of my pockets, whether it's electronic sell-through, rental, subscription, et cetera. The split is roughly 35% advertising, 65% direct spend. You go to a country like France, and it's actually 52% advertising. Yes. You go into the Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, and it's significantly higher. It's up in the probably 60, 70% advertising. You go over to Asia, into Asian republics, it's far more advertising. So first of all, I think that's a very important point. Geographically, the models are very different if we just think about this split between direct and indirect spend. So now with that as a point, I do think we are seeing a lot more monetization. Is it perfect? No, but I mean, I don't see too many YouTube videos these days without a pre-roll in front of them. You go back a couple years ago and nothing had ads in front of it. So they're definitely getting a lot better. If you look at some of the ComScore data over the last 5 quarters, the number of ads served against video has just skyrocketed. It's a hockey stick going up. So there's a better job being done by the industry in terms of monetizing it.
There's still some challenges with putting the high value CPM content goes with the content that they understand. So that's a problem, because when you have user generated videos, some of the advertisers that would pay the big bucks actually won't pay big bucks, or won't even be featured on a comedian who's some guy that they don't know who put something up, even if it's popular, until it's a known quantity, until they know that this person has become a celebrity in a sense, and that the content that person's broadcasting is not objectionable. Let's call that. So there's a whole set of content on YouTube that gets kind of crap ads, and then different high value ads.
Yeah, we're also seeing ad loads increase. So more spots per stream. We're seeing length of the ads increase. Quite frankly, it's looking a lot more like television out there, which I'm not sure as a user's perspective, I see as a good thing. Certainly to your point, from a monetization perspective, it puts a lot more dollars into the ecosystem. So it's baby steps. It's getting better. I think we still have a long way to go. From a purely personal perspective, I hope we don't get to the same ad loads as we have on television. There's an awful lot of clutter out there, but we are moving in that direction.
The other thing, just to build on that, that we're also beginning to see is ad consistency between different devices, right? The way the video ad market kind of grew is, PC first, web first, mobile was behind, tablet was behind. Now all that is kind of, getting to essentially a consistent cross-platform space.
And building on that, the cross-platform piece, I think that's really essential too. And Ty highlighted about this. As brands agencies leverage the data across multiple devices, we do feel that they'll be much more willing and comfortable to put their brand associated with a newer short form UGC channel, where today I don't think the masses are.
Yeah, some are, some aren't. It also, I think with the mobile phone, the ability to get a much higher value because of the geographic targeting and everything's like, my TV set isn't really driving around with me. So the reality is the phone, which is probably good. But the phone can really, so the ad is contextually aware. The phone is aware of where you're even going. The ad that's delivered with the short form content you're consuming is, it knows my kid likes to, hate to say it, stop at Baskin Robbins or whatever on his way home. So as he's on walking or looking at working his way home, that ad will show up. And so when you can start doing that kind of targeting, I realize all of us are probably the multi-platform nature now, also where the ads follow you across all the platforms, which does happen on the web. That will come to this kind of pre-roll advertising as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we had a hand wave from the very back of the room, which was our room monitor telling us we've got 5 minutes left and they're going to kick us out. Last question from the center here.
Hi, Don Goldman from Visual Unity. You've addressed the OTT front with the big guys. There's over 5,000 small MSOs operating around this country, mom and pop little places that are looking to maybe get a secret sauce and increase their subscriber base by offering Netflix style platform to their subscribers. Have you seen much activity in this area?
There's a lot going on. The major the MSOs are basically productizing their platforms, and they want to take it to these guys. And so you will see, like a powered by Xfinity in a mom and pop, where they're from a cloud service just running this new platform, and they can have all their stuff in there. They can even customize it. So these guys are becoming platform providers, realizing how powerful it is, especially also internationally. They're going to take these platforms because people internationally don't have the resources. So if they can't buy the mom and pop, then they're going to power the mom and pop. And so that's really, I think, a trend that's coming. It's kind of a weird concept, but it's just too complex. And they're making like Android, so they might as well put it in many places as they can, rather than keep it just in their little world.
That was my next question. Will you see some consolidation? Will big guys buy some of these systems? More of that consolidation?
I think you see that. I think it's going to happen in a bunch of different ways. Like I can think you can see absolutely Google providing software platforms to people that they can run. it's fairly complicated. I think this guy down here is building them. You know, the compression, the delivery of the content, the ingestion platform. So, you know, these things, these kind of, I'll call it service in a box kind of like things. It's happened completely for music. It's happened for video on demand services. We'll see what it does for the rest of the.
It's happening. It's going to happen here too. And the key here is, you know, it's cloud enabled. There's economies of scale. That's a big deal, right? You know, you do something once, it's in the cloud, you share that across multiple MSOs, lots of subscribers. You know, that's kind of the key. So we should kind of talk offline about that because those platforms are coming.
Yeah, I think you can actually look to Europe for a little bit of leadership here. We're seeing a lot more partnerships between service providers and over-the-top providers, in particular between Netflix. So there are at least two of the big service providers in France have partnered with Netflix, and it's happened in other countries. I think they've done it in the UK as well. And I believe there's a couple Scandinavian providers as well. So it's happening. It's just not happening as quickly here in the US. There's been conversations between Netflix and Comcast that haven't really gone anywhere. I think at the end of the day, you have to think about this. Reed Hastings has said time and time again, we ask who his competitor is. He says it's HBO. He sees himself as a content company, not necessarily so much as a distribution company. And, you know, if he can create agreements with Verizon and with Comcast and get paid and be sort of similar to an HBO on those platforms as well, he'd be very happy to provide content. A lot of, you know, to like all of this stuff, the devil's in the details and working out those agreements.
Okay, I think we're at the end of our time. I want to thank all of you for having joined us here. I want to, particularly since when we started out at our official starting time, I think there were 2 in the audience and 6 on the stage, so I'm glad to see that shifted. Also want to do, if Rick, if you're watching, Mr. Doherty, thank you for putting this event together